I keep looking at Charleston place.
I know. If you really look at Charleston Place, it's not a great design. We're just kind of, but what they're changing, what they're proposed to change is.
Well, but even changes. Yeah.
Isn't there like a language?
Yeah, I have his project. I wasn't looking at this today, but that's one of Morris projects. If you look at this, it's all made up of these old signs they found.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's really cool. Huh? See right here, look at this. See that cool? If you look at it, it's old signs. Anyway, I don't know why I had that over. I was looking at other stuff for some reason. So I wanted to
That's
look at
kind of thing about science.
signage. Is it on? That's fine, totally. What I used to tell people, sure. It's not big.
Sure, so I don't know. We've been on and on and on.
Oh, that's fine.
That's the world is this. Like this.
What is on it? Right. Oh, right. Yeah. I think it's it. When I used to I was holiday. It needs to be just like how it's built. Less of a side, more like potential component. It's just like a side I see everywhere else. And it's just it's big. It's hard to get.
I understand.
Well, hey, Jerry, see you then.
Okay. Good to see you, man. Madam. I have a short duration here.
Yeah, you're good.
What's that? Yeah, I have to recuse for.
Good to see you.
Time to.
Wow, I agree. Very short, yeah. We're not bad at all. Yeah, thank you. Good luck.
Well, I came in for one item. When I first got on the board, it was every time. And she would just sit there and shoot the notes, and she'd listen to proceedings, and she could hear as the architect was sticking his foot in his mouth. She just That's too funny.
Yeah.
That's fun.
He's going to little coaches. Yeah, they have a smaller office here.
She had to,
Yeah, he's leaving
talking
on
about
his
her lunch.
He's our first employee.
Sims had a story.
Yeah, I remember. I remember he joined you.
Yeah,
That's
he's great. He just, you know, he wants to get more experience in the environment. He don't really argue with him, you know. Great job. So we're kind of freaking out. We need people. No, anybody. Come on, can you draw really fast?
You saw my phone and gave her.
It's on hold right now.
The funniest thing.
So, jump out.
Sorry, this didn't get to earlier.
The Tellis sisters.
Multi-family developer decided not to do it.
I always thought we made
So,
now.
trying to figure out what to do next. Something's gonna go there, a hotel's gonna go there, but Should it be bigger or smaller?
You seem to be this place.
But you can advance the slides.
Thank you. That was a good.
Mark, can I borrow your pen? Fill out this recusal form with joy.
Yeah, that's the thing. Do you give him the back pen that you've been using?
Same thing.
This is adequate. This pen.
I think he gets angry and he writes it down.
I think I've been using
That would explain. Looks like you've been drawing that concrete block. Yes. I'm good. Appreciate it. You don't know where you're short, whatever. Well, like,
yeah, I mean,
Yeah, sure. You got some other stuff?
yeah, I do. My role is but then also there's plenty of
okay, you reached it for an hour.
You have an office, you still have it.
Okay, good afternoon. We've reached the appointed time. We have a brief agenda this evening. So we'll run through a little intro and get right down to work. Welcome to the May 24, 2023 BAR large meeting at the Crawlcheck Meeting Room at 2 George Street. My name is John Robinson. I'm the chairman for tonight. I'm accompanied by Jay White, who's recusing for agenda item number 2, Lou Sobchuk, Eddie Bello serving as alternate member, and Steve Ramos also serving as alternate member. City staff present are the city architects, Tor Parrish, Lawrence Courtney, staff architect, and Linda Bennett, senior preservation planner. The applicants have been required to submit any documents in advance of this meeting by the required deadline. Staff or applicants, let me make that update because Lawrence brought my attention. We've apparently lost the clicker. So we're going back to the old rule, which is if you will ask Lawrence to which slide you wish to go, he will advance there. Please simply ask him and he will do so. Applicants, staff, and board members are required to give their name when speaking. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed to the City of Charleston Public Meeting Channel on YouTube. Your presence here is your consent to be recorded. Reminder for those members of the public who may be with us tonight, as well as for our applicants. Each presentation will include an introduction and overview of the project by Corey on behalf of city staff for the benefit of the applicant and the public. This is followed by the applicant's presentation, which has a 10-minute time limit unless extended by the chair at the applicant's request. Any and all presenters during their presentation should clearly state their name for the record, and those people affiliated with the project, be they the owners, architects, developers, or designers, should speak during this portion rather than later portions. The applicant's presentation is followed by public comment. Written public comments were due at noon yesterday. Any of those comments have been disseminated to the board and will not be read into the record unless determined as necessary by the chair or requested by a member. Any member of the public who is here with us this evening who wishes to be heard is requested to approach the podium, state their name and address for the record, and they're politely reminded there's a 2-minute time limit for those remarks unless extended by the chair. The applicant should not respond to members of the public after the public comment period. There's a later time for that. This is followed by city staff comments and recommendations. The applicant is then afforded up to 5 minutes to respond to their own presentation, public comments, or city staff comments and recommendations. The applicant does not have to use this time period if it's not necessary. Brevity is virtue. This is followed by board discussion and a vote. The applicant presentation is over at this point. Public comment is closed. The applicant should clarify inaccurate information when recognized by the chair by raising a hand or otherwise being acknowledged and being called upon. Board members will be polled by me for their vote on any given motion. Chair will reread the motion verbatim, and the board member making the motion should correct me if I have misstated it. Once the motion is in proper order, properly written down and seconded, each member should clearly vote yea in favor of the motion or nay not in favor of the respective motion. The results are posted at charleston-sc.gov/BAR. No agenda item this evening has been deferred or withdrawn, and we only have 2 agenda items. We've said what Mr. White will recuse for. Friendly reminder to those members of the public visiting with us to silence cell phones in disrupted environments. And last procedural note, comments that are not related to architecture and aesthetics or the purview of this board, such as zoning, parking, traffic, and lot coverage, cannot be voiced here. We are polite about that and allow a little bit of talk about that around the edges, but be reminded that it's very important as a public body that the presentations before us be germane in our considerations. That said, we will have approval of our May 10 meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve? There's a motion from the subject to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Bell seconds. It's in proper order. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
It's too late on my.
That's okay. I'm counting that as aye and yay. So that is
The
resolved.
first motion, you just like, you get it next
Right on.
time.
That's right.
Don't
Those are
like
too
minutes.
It's like Jeopardy. You gotta click on the draw. Okay. Agenda item number, or presentation number 122 Bufane Street.
All right, 122 Bufane and 4 Gadsden Street is a mock-up panel. This is related to new construction in Charleston Village, District 3, Old and Historic District. And then, next, as a reminder of the location.
Applicant has the floor.
Tom Miller, one of the owners of the development group. Not much to say, good to see you guys again. I think we've addressed everything on the list now, so open to the comments.
Okay, very good. Short and sweet. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Any member of the public wishing to be heard on this agenda? Seeing none, city staff comments or recommendations?
Okay, just an observation, the primary issue of the alignment of the perimeter beam outside the face and the top of column traffic is incorrect. What conditions for approval? Copper flashing sitting on top of the capstone beam should be painted to match it. I do believe that was a board comment last time. And second, there is a gap at some of the column capitals on the building itself, which needs to be sealed. And we're recommending your approval.
Incorporating those comments.
I'll bring the
Very
comments.
good. Very good. All right. Any response from the applicant at this time? Thank you for working with us. I know it's been a complex process and tedious, but it works. Board comments or a vote on this agenda?
I spent a good bit of time on the site yesterday. I missed the previous meeting, but it appears from my estimation that they've addressed all the comments that the board and staff had that would support.
Okay. Is that a motion? Or well, let's have further discussion. Further discussion, Mr. Bello.
I was going to move for approval with staff comments.
Incorporating your comments. And so there's a motion to approve incorporating staff comments. Is there a second to that motion? Mr. Ramos seconds. It's in proper order. Ms. Sobchak, how do you vote?
Yeah.
Mr. White?
Yay.
Mr. Ramos? Mr. Bello?
Yeah.
And myself, Ian. Thank you to the applicant. Agenda item number 2.
Item 2 is 74 President Street. This is in the MUSC campus. New construction, District 85, 125 in the Old City District. The applicant is requesting preliminary approval for new construction. The 6-story, 89,000 square foot classroom building for the MUSC College of Health Professions. We've been looking at a lot of things in this area, so you should be familiar with it. Street images of today. Historic Hall.
Very good. The applicant has the floor.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Altman. I'm with SMHA Architects, and I'm here to ask for preliminary approval for MUSC's Child Health Professions Academic Building. So, next slide. We won't belabor this as we just went over that, but this building is the third of 3 buildings for Child Health Professions. The first one is along Rutledge Avenue, and the second one is existing at the corner of B and President Street. Our site sits just north of the bioengineering building and just south of the existing Vince Mosley building, adjacent to the urban garden area. As part of our studies, we looked at the materiality on campus and predominantly defined by curtain wall, metal panels, stucco, precast, and brick. And we looked to incorporate those into our building to be a continuation of that theme on campus. The streetscape looking across the street to the west is the psychology building. And this is the streetscape with our building adjacent to the bioengineering building and the Vince Mosley building to the left. To address some of the comments from the previous conceptual meeting, staff comment was, and as well as board comment, was to relook at the penthouse enclosure and try to reduce the massing to the extent possible. Another one was to look at the northeast corner of the building as far as the massing and the complexity of the facade and see if we could possibly simplify that and strengthen the concept. And then the third one was to look at the north elevation with the amount of solid wall and opening ratio there. So we'll address that as we move along. Likewise, most of our planning was confined to right around the perimeter of the building. The red dashed area you see is kind of an alternate because that area will be affected by the future construction of the College of Medicine. And so we're working with their design team as a collaborative design exercise for that area. It's just not been defined at this point. Planning schedule. This is overall site lighting for the buildings. We're really limiting the site building lighting to the egress area, so just egress doors and along the eastern steps and ramp area, not proposing any kind of uplighting in the building. Lighted bollards along here, which is a vehicular drop off for people, so it's just confined to that one location. Floor plan wise, this is the previous floor plan. The 2 major changes we did is existing, the magnitude on the north side, but with the addition or the forthcoming College of Medicine building, that area is going to be very constricted, and so we felt it was appropriate to move it to the eastern side of the building. And you'll see in the next slide, we've reconfigured the geometry of the first floor, so this portion of the building was sticking out past the facade and massing up the second floor building, and it felt kind of awkward, so we reworked that. So, go to the next slide. You can see here, we've aligned this facade of the building to match the upper floor, so I think it works much more successfully. And we've moved that main entrance to the east side of the building. These upper floors pretty much remain massing-wise the same, except for this main lobby area on the northeast corner. You can see this previous one. We'll go to the next slide. That geometry has changed slightly to match what we incorporated on the first floor. Third through 4 floors have not really changed. This is the third floor. Are any changes really? 4th floor. Change here. Next slide, please. Next slide. The 5th floor and 6th floor were proposed to be shelled, and they remained that way. 5th floor. Sixth floor. Penthouse, this was the previous floor plan of the penthouse. We go to the next slide. We looked to try to reduce that as much as we could. Plan-wise, I believe it's a little bit narrower, but not very much. There's a lot of mechanical space, or a lot of mechanical equipment, in this space. There is an open area for some RT units up here and generator down here, but those are all enclosed with solid walls, so they're not visible from the outside. Next slide, please. All right, getting into elevation. So this is the western elevation along President Street. There's two major changes. One, again, to address the comment about the penthouse. We looked to reduce that as much as we could. Unfortunately, with the amount of equipment that's in there, we weren't able to move that very much. It does visually look taller in our new elevation, and there's a reason for that. We originally were hoping to have the parapet higher, like shown, with that curtain wall cantilevering past the penthouse slab. When we got into the development of that and started working with manufacturers, we recognized there was a limitation to how far we could do that, so we had to bring it down a little bit. And so that's kind of why it seems like the visual looks like it's taller in this newer image than it was. The building height has not changed. The other change that we've done to the building, and you'll see this throughout the other elevations, is we rectified in our mind these vertical solid metal panels that are in the curtain wall. We've broken those so that they feel they're offset, and that was one of the tenets of the design, was to try to incorporate movement into the side of the building. We felt like that was a stronger move than what we had. We also felt like there was that horizontal metal panel that's having the floor line was sort of fighting that for priority. So we removed that horizontal band and put in spandrel glazing to really emphasize that verticality at those locations. And then along the ground floor, we've changed the southwest corner glazing to be more consistent with what's happening around the rest of the ground floor area. I'll also mention, as you can see here, that we've had to remove the bridge from the project, so it's no longer in the scope of the project. Next slide, please. This is the south facade. Not a lot of change here. Again, you can see we've broken those metal vertical panels so that we've got that offsetting effect, and trying to incorporate some of the movement into the building. Generally just kind of massaging some of the proportions of the windows and openings, but not a lot of change from the previous iteration. The windows on the ground floor, again, that southwest corner, we changed to be more consistent with the rest of the building, and we've added additional windows along this side here. This is the east facade. This is the facade facing towards campus. Again, breaking the vertical panels in the curtain wall to provide that movement. One of the comments was looking at this elevation here with this hyphen and whether or not that was too busy or just not quite successful. We looked at that, agreed, also had some internal programmatic changes that really sort of devalued the purpose of that, so we've eliminated that element and simplified it with a consistent feel to the elevation. At the main entry, you can also see we have very minimal signage right at the entry, and the same amount on the western side as well. Glazing along the ground floor, we try to be a little more consistent about the spacing and the size of those, and added additional glass to that floor to lighten it up a little bit. And finally, the north elevation. So one of the comments was associated with this brick wall and glazing. There was three kind of primary factors that were playing into this. The first one was some internal programming of labs and classroom spaces that additional glass for those functions was not an advantage to them. The second is, when you'll see in one of the renderings coming up, the proximity of the proposed College of Medicine building is such that it really screens most of this north elevation from you. But the big one was that, you know, that proximity with our assumed property line, we're so close to it that we're allowed very little openings in that wall, so we're kind of limited. So all three of those kind of criteria bearing down on this, we kind of circle back to what we had and feel like it's appropriate, and I think it'll be easier to understand when you see the perspectives. Otherwise, we just did some massaging of the divisions of the curtain wall and just general proportion exercises there. You can also see in this, I mentioned earlier, the penthouse is much narrower than it was originally from the edge of the building, so it's further back from that eave on the top floor. Next slide. The signage, again, we're just keeping with the standard signage type that's on campus, so we're not deviating from that. And these are some perspective renderings. The previous iteration on top, the one down below without the bridge. Not much from a massing standpoint has changed, just some of those adjustments within the curtain wall that we mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. West facade on President Street, and you can see the change within the curtain wall. Otherwise, not a whole lot of massing change here. This is the telling slide in the sense of that north wall. You can see in this bottom image, we've overlaid the proposed College of Medicine building here, so you can see just how much of that north facade is obstructed by that, or will be obstructed by that. And so that window placement we feel is very appropriate, considering those views. You can also see a little bit of the penthouse, but I think it also sort of demonstrates how much of that really does get kind of screened from the eye level perspective. Next slide. This is the east facade again. We did not include the College of Medicine on this slide because honestly, if we did, we would be standing inside of it with this image, so we didn't include it. But you can kind of see again how we changed those vertical elements and really strengthened that verticality within the element building and remove this hyphen element at the entry of the building. And also, this is the best view where you can see that previous first floor and how it projected out beyond the facade of the upper part of the building, and how it's been pulled back in line with the rest of the building. Next slide. And last, this is the southwest corner again without the bridge. Again, not much change with the massing. Just consistent with the way that we're treating the curtain wall and portions of that. Next slide. We have several building sections in large detail. I wasn't going to belabor going through those unless you have a specific question about one. We could certainly jump to it. But I did want to mention something I forgot earlier. If you could go back to the first floor plan. I wanted to mention this change in that brick wall here, so which had been, I believe, reworked in past projects. We're having to shift it a little bit north or west towards President Street because the venue requires service access to these existing switch gears and transformers. So we're having to relocate that jog unit, opposed to disassemble and reassemble using the existing bricks there. So it'll be the same image, same look to the wall, just relocated. That I will open up any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Alden. Any questions at this time? I know we might have some.
I do have a couple, and it's sort of design related. Can you go to just one of the elevations? Go to B250. No, that's not the right one. Just a regular best elevation. I just wanted to design your thoughts on the design. So, I'm sorry, the one right before B201. Thanks. Can you talk about what, why this rhythm is the way it is? Does it relate to the rooms? Doesn't seem to relate to the rest of it. I'm just wondering what the pattern is.
It's not the rooms at this point because that is shell space. I think it was just more to break it up a little bit more. Obviously, these are on the column line, so
Yeah.
those are kind of set. We were just trying to reduce just the runoff sense, if you will, because it doesn't have the height that the rest of this has.
And then my second question, and it does have to do a little bit with your section, but on this same elevation, but if you go to, it's just asking why you're doing it a certain way. Sorry, I'm going to it on my sheet, it's easier. So if you go to B255, you'll have a, it comes down and then there's this sort of aluminum soffit and it comes out and then it tucks in. Is it just all a canopy even on both
It's a
sides? I
canopy
didn't really
because-
understand that.
So there's a walkway, if you go to the ground floor, there's a walkway that connects back over to
Okay.
President Street, and so we were trying to provide as much coverage to that walkway as we could.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. I'm just curious.
Very good. Anything further from the board at this moment? Always come back. Thank you, Mr. Altman. Any member of the public wish to be heard on this?
I'm not a member of the submittal team, but I was going to put up the materials that we brought.
Thank you.
Chris mentioned several of those, and then this was the mass model that we presented with our conceptual submittal. I know several of y'all weren't here, but just wanted to have that for reference.
Thank you. Perfect. All right. City staff comments or recommendations?
Yeah, actually, we're just on that page for 1 second. Because I'm gonna reference a couple of
Over
pages,
that. Okay.
and then we'll get to the stuff. Just for analysis, with the exception of lowering the penthouse due to functional constraints, the mill has addressed the staff and board direction from the conceptual review. And then now we will be looking at materials, finishes, and details. And then I'm gonna just point out some of the stuff on the staff comments because I think it might be clear,
Sure.
but the first one is on the south elevation. And what you see, this canopy edge was really continuous, and now it has this teeny little jog in it. And so I just wanted to say at the south elevation, there's a jog in the canopy at the top, and it is preferential that it be continuous because it had this real seamless appearance to it previously, and it's such a small jog, it feels like it could go away. And then I'll just read the next one because I don't have the page number, but number 2, the columns at the west elevation grade level are thinner than previous and should be thickened. Can we go to, I do remember, can we go to that west elevation? All right, right here's good. So these are 2'8" in width, and they're a little bit deeper, like 3'4". And there's a pilaster sort of thing here, and then a recess of the brick. These are really, if I'm not mistaken, centered over this whole span, and they're a little bit thinner than they were last time. And I'm not saying that they should be lined up under this left side, but I think if they were just thickened up a little bit, it would not cause that. And let's stay on this page for a second. I'm going to read staff comment number 4. The two-tone color palette in conjunction with the 2-tier detail right here at the underside of the canopy at the 6th floor makes for strong contrast at what seemed more seamless and lighter previously. I don't know if it's too dark, if it's the contrast, but there was a real seamless, lighter appearance, even though this is all dark, than what happens right here. So just study the color and transition at this location. And then going back to number 3, bollards, lit or unlit, are not typically approved by BAR. However, the proposed bollards appear to be more for pathway lighting rather than as a protective barrier, and also for you to confirm that it does sound like they're somewhat protective from vehicular. So I would like for the board to weigh in on their perspective on the use of bollards and the use of lit bollards. We typically have not been approving those. 5, signage is typically handled separately. However, staff is most appreciative of the applicant team's consideration of how signage would be incorporated at this stage. Signage size seem appropriate and consistent with other MUSC buildings. Number 6, materials as far as physical samples and color samples have not been previewed by staff, and staff would like to reserve the ability to provide feedback. Additionally, the board should express any specific condition desired to be incorporated into the mock-up. And then last, the historic wall. I didn't quite understand what was happening with it, but I would love to know if there was any history about that jog and when it was put in the wall. And then we are recommending preliminary approval, incorporating board comments, staff conditions, final review by staff for permit drawings.
Very good. Thank you, Tori. Oh, Luda.
Yeah, I might be missed it, but where is those bollards? To see?
Right, you pointed out.
There, if you go to the first floor.
Yeah, but is there,
B101.2.
is there, how is it?
What do they look like?
And
Yeah.
then there's an image of them on B202. We can go to that too.
You're looking at right here, along that.
Yeah, but
You can get drop off, but they're looking right along that.
do you have them in perspective or anywhere else?
Not on the perspective, but the product is on B202, yeah.
And
You want to see the cut sheet then?
And they're also on the east side too, near the ramp to go in.
They're not,
Those are
they're not
actually
on
in
the
the,
ramp.
in the.
Okay,
main wall.
okay. So really it's just right there, President.
So they actually lights, not the bollards, right?
It's not a bollard like the round top,
Yeah.
metal steel thing. It's thinner and the light sits at the top. I mean, it's almost like raised ground lighting, path
We have them around town, so, you know,
lighting. I had B202 written down.
the,
So is it there to function to keep cars off a path, or is it just a form of lighting? It's both.
And as you all know, bollards are typically TRC, but I guess what I'd say is, I don't have a problem approving them as an aesthetic matter, and if TRC has an issue with that, we can work that out between the two boards.
there's this restaurant next to our office, the cow, whatever. They have those,
Where's
they,
that?
on the Meeting Street. And they work very well.
Don't you
There are
count?
some down at Meeting and Rod, I think, around the complex there. But they're not, and there's some at the aquarium, but it's more of an internal.
Yeah.
Sometimes we use vehicular access, sometimes we don't. So there's not a lot of examples of bollards.
There are a lot on the Mississippi
Yes,
Coast
there are.
in this
Yeah,
area
that's what I
too. Just, there are a couple on the north side of bioengineering, just across the driveway from this building. And then on the south side of bioengineering and drug discovery, there are a lot of pathway, used as pathway lighting in that area.
I was gonna say it's consistent with what you see elsewhere on the campus.
They work, I don't know. They
Does
work.
my remark give the staff any heartburn? That
No,
we can
and
approve it,
I
and if
think I
TRC
deleted
takes
it.
issue with that, we'll resolve it.
By mistake, but that was a question I had, is how consistent is that with what's on campus?
On the campus itself, okay.
On campus.
Okay. Good. Any response from that? Okay, thank you, Mr. Holman. Board discussion.
You got comments?
Sure, yeah, I'll start. And I think the bulk of the revisions that were made are improvements. Like the fenestration on the west facade is a lot more vertical now, which I think is a positive. The east elevation, I'd say, is improved. The brick mass on the north facade doesn't bother me. I think it's a nice, it's nice, you have a lot of glass, but to have some solid is a good thing. I'm struggling with the mechanical penthouse, and this is like, it's like another level of the building. It's 20 feet tall, it's got an elevator, stairs, roof. And I understand it's required, so I think it should be treated with similar care to the rest of the facade, because it's visible. And I'm not saying it needs to be hidden, I just think that something more than just a metal box. And if you look at, we shouldn't judge it by the elevations, because that's not a fair judgment, but if you look at like 254 and 255,
$255, go to that one, Lawrence.
yeah, so 255, it's visible, and then 254. So I don't know what the solution is. I just think that some more attention needs to be had to the actual facade of that box. The other detail that's is a detail is if you go to 253. Or 252. The kind of that lid, the top of the building, it seems kind of heavy, and I think because it's got a flat fascia, and that fascia is about 2 feet tall, and because it's got this dramatic cantilever, it seems like it wants to be a little lighter. And I don't know if that means that the profile of the edge should be tapered. The comment by city staff about the two-tone, I don't know if that's helping. It could also be that the treatment of the actual underside needs some detail as well to sometimes just having more lines on the architecture helps lighten it up. And it kind of seems very abstract right now. I think the top building is very important, even if it is mechanical. I think that overhang in the top, to me, needs something, but I can't say what it is.
Better in the conceptual.
It looks thinner.
Well, I agree with all the comments you made, Steve. Well, I like the design a lot. I think it's very strong, and I like most of the changes. I think the changes, the sort of movement that y'all did from in the bays here. I like that. I like the other changes you made on the other facades with the fenestration. The reason I asked about to me, is the top floor, and again, none of these are deferral. This is more design. Can we refine it? But because I feel like this building, it still needs another pass at getting things to work out a little more cohesively, because there's some good ideas, but they're not quite gelling with the whole building. But to me, it's the floor at the top and the floor at the bottom that don't seem, that's why I asked about the bays, because they're just sort of, there's a rhythm, but it doesn't have anything to do with the bottom, but there's not a rhythm that you can recognize. So just wonder if you go to, sorry, a little picky, but to B201. So, and I'm talking about this floor right here, which I think is much improved over that, but this sort of aligns with that. It's like either just make all this on its own rhythm and let it be different, or let it tie in. Something about it doesn't, I don't understand the rationale. And then the ground, it's kind of the same thing. It's kind of like the ground level is we just ended up with that. It just doesn't, it's just not as strong as the rest of the building. I don't know. I know there's going to be a wall there, but that just bothered me. I definitely agree with the city's comments about the top. If you go to that rendering, the rendering shows it the best. 255. And what I like about, again, I think this is way stronger. I don't know if it's even changed, but I like it better. But this line, there's like this crispness to the design that is just nice and light. Some of the things I think it could use, I would just bring that back. And the reason I asked about that canopy at the bottom, sorry, I keep standing up, but I'll do it one more time. I'll quit. But I like this sort of interplay of these two bays with this void in between, and then this canopy, this big heavy canopy, just clunks it up. It's like, why is that there? I mean, to me, if you have to have a canopy, first of all, I don't want to see it at all on this side, but it just seems like it should be a little more elegant, a little lighter. I just feel like it's a missed opportunity. You've got this great box. I really like how you did the brick, the panel of it, and then there's this sort of, to me, unfortunate, sort of glued on heavy canopy that disrupts all the good stuff he did. Not saying you shouldn't have canopy. Maybe it's thinner, like Steve was saying at the top. Maybe I just think that should be something you develop further. And then first thing I thought of when I looked at this is, why is that thing so big at the top? I get it. You got to have all that room, and I don't know what the answer is, because if you spend a lot of time designing it, do you draw more attention to it? I don't know if that's the answer. Y'all just went with, let's just make it this simple metal box. Maybe it's a different color, maybe it's lighter. I don't know, but I do agree it's going to be more visible than you think. And again, I think maybe just one more pass of looking at it at the next level. Be worth it. Sounds like a lot of critical comments. I think the design is really good, and I do like the changes. I just think there's a couple of little elements that could make it really, again, a lot more cohesive.
Further board comments?
That mezzanine floor you're talking about, it's recessed.
Up here?
So, yeah,
Yeah.
all around, you never will see the light.
Yeah, maybe.
never.
You
On-
can, you
on
can
the-
overrule my comment, that's fine.
And they're trying at least at common line, right?
Yeah, I get that.
So it's another movement, but it's, you can see on the perspectives that you do not even see it. The mechanical box, definitely the issue for all of us, I think. It's just, because it's so big and it doesn't belong even here, why is it, there? So it needs to be continuity of the design which you already have. And rest of the comments, I agree. As far as the north elevation, I always like that one, actually. It's sculptural, and there is a balance of recesses and glass, and it's almost contemporary classical to me.
Which facade?
The north facade.
Yeah, I like it.
This piece is, it's very balanced to me, and I know it was against a solid wall and things like that, so I think it's successful. I'm still curious about actually shifting the windows. For me, it's almost like earthquake already hit you. I don't know. I don't know if it's necessary, but that's a really subjective opinion here. And on the, I guess, east elevation is, I did like the previous one better again, but there's changes which we imposed on you, so on perspectives, it's just better. You have this interruption and and all that continuity. All that said, I agree with staff comments. I think ballards is or light fixtures rather than ballards. I think they will be very workable. It's very urban actually to me, and I don't know. It maybe will be, maybe this is a start to introduce this element in the campus anyway. So, I guess the most positive thing is the top floor and kind of concentrating on the ground level as well.
If you look at, just been staring at this view, it's been up, and one of the comments at the last meeting was that it was top heavy. I think it had to do with the proportions of the top to the bottom floor, and that the bottom seemed kind of compressed. And I guess it still kind of feels, at least in this image, feels a little compressed. So maybe while that canopy is being looked at, there was a way for it to move up just a little bit, to have a little bit more space underneath the brick overhang. Just might feel a little more comfortable.
Doesn't bother me.
Doesn't
It's
bother you?
almost like pedestal, so it's not you have all that mess above. We're not giving good directions right now.
I would just say that on fenestration, at the top, I agree with Eddie and staff's comments on there should either be a clear contrast, which is acceptable, both at the first floor and mezzanine with that fenestration that flows through. But it should either be a clear contrast or clearly complementary and not a compromise between the two. That's what this non-architect would say.
You said it way better than me.
And the only other thing being the notch around the top element. I agree with what and Steve have said about the the conundrum regarding the mechanical box at the top, particularly Eddie's comment that maybe the more you mess with it, the worse it gets. Maybe the easier thing to do or the easiest thing to do is to do a color revision that makes it blend in a little more. Or not be as, let me say not blend in, not be as conspicuous. And, you know, it's very hard looking at these perspective renderings to know what kind of color contrast you're drawing to it and whether something that's kind of battleship gray is going to draw more or less attention to it. But maybe a color study would be what fixes that, the concern about that.
I don't think it's enough. Yeah. Because it's still a box, it still is. And there's so much detail in this building that it renders more attention to.
So you think it warrant having some detail on the box. So that's what I have to offer. Further board comments?
Well, I'll just chime in about the bollards. I have no issue with lighted bollards. This is on the campus. It's
Yeah, and I personally I've seen tons of them. I understand the function, very, very practical.
Yeah.
We will resolve the issue with TRC if there is one, just because that's a battle of purview.
Yeah.
But
I think there's just been a
aesthetically, they're fine.
tradition
Yeah.
that bollards in general have not been something
We do.
looked upon because they can't. These are not.
Yeah, these are
So that's why
have
we
an
wanted to
aesthetic
go away.
element.
And
They
this is
should not
really
be
on
called
their
bollards.
campus. It's not even fronting a
Correct.
street, so it's, I think they look good.
As soon as you stop calling them bollards, it will be fine.
Call them lights.
Protective lighting features.
To be clear, it was when I saw bollards that it
You
drew
just
my
call it what
attention
it said
and
on
then
the-
I didn't see
On
it.
plans, yeah. Further board comments?
I'll make a motion. We're all over the place, but I'll try to summarize. Preliminary approval. Staff comments, I agree with all the staff comments. Did you say you were okay with the bollards? Are you okay? So I agree with staff comments. Study the top, the mechanical penthouse, and this is not the motion, but it could be as simple as that you've got some reveals in the panels. I don't know what it is. I don't think you need to make it personally decorated, but I think a little more detail and a color. So anyway, so study the top. I would ask you to study that canopy and at the brick there at the bottom.
You've been very emphatic about what specific areas you want for restudy, but would your motion would be for preliminary approval incorporating board and staff comments?
Yes, I would. Yeah, that's a lot simpler.
I was just making that. I
Yes,
understood
that's
what you were
much
saying.
better. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Is there a second to that motion? Second from Luditz in proper order. Mr. Ramos, how do you vote?
Yay.
Mr. Bella?
Yay.
Ms. Ocho?
Yay.
And myself, yay in favor. Thank you. We'll look forward to working with you to get this completed.
That will be adjusted.
Good, good meeting.
This brick right here, personally, this right here, look how this brick should just be this. Who's walking there?
You guys should do things around. Yes.
Oh, I don't know what yours is.
You might need to remind me. So you saw the board composition.
Oh, this?
Yeah.
Yes.